at any moment they might surprise you with something wonderful. And I kept waiting for that, the proof that even though my mother was a hard woman, deep down, she loved me and cared about me and wanted me to know that I made her life a little bit brighter. And even now, I find myself waiting. But there was this moment, this one instant of strange calm, where she looked in my direction and said, "I see you." It's the last thing she said to me. Not a statement of judgment or disappointment, just acceptance and the simple recognition of another person in a room. Hello there. You are a person, and I see you. Let me tell you, it's a weird thing to feel at 54 years old that for the first time in your life, your mother sees you. Jesus Christ. We were in the intensive care unit. She was just reading a sign. You know the shittiest thing about all of this? Is when that stranger behind the counter gave me that free churro, that small act of kindness showed more compassion than my mother gave me her entire goddamn life. Like, how hard is it to do something nice for a person? This woman at the Jack in the Box didn't even know me. I'm your son. All I had was you.
So here's the thing about neglect and the need to be seen in Bojack Horseman. It's a concept that's described really well in Free Churro, where Bojack, while giving a eulogy for his mother, latches on to the understanding that his mother finally saw him before she passed, acknowledged his presence, and treated him even remotely like a person. Eventually, however, once he understands that she wasn't really speaking to him, or saying really anything of meaning at all, he ends up becoming more hurt from the prospect of possibly getting closure and being recognized, and then once again being only disappointed by these figures. It speaks to a really important and prevalent problem where children don't get the love and care that they need developmentally, and it in turn can possibly affect them for the rest of their lives. In fact, neglect is far more prevalent than other types of childhood abuse, and is even considered to be relatively common. And this is exemplified in many families across the cast of Bojack Horseman. Not through just Bojack himself, though he is likely the most obvious and in-depth example. There are so many neglectful parents in the show, although they all show it in different ways. The prime examples being Bojack's parents, who really didn't pay much attention to him at all when he was a child, as we can clearly see in Brand New Couch, where they seemingly left him alone all night and then argue over his television show at such a volume that he can't hear a single word, and then not even acknowledging Bojack's presence. Beatrice comes in for a few seconds and is overtly cruel, but there's never really any conversation between the two of them, only blame from one side. No words of kindness or even apologies out of simple decency for arguing so blatantly and violently in front of him. No recognition of him as a person who deserves to be living, deserves to be loved. No giving him time to even give reasonable input in the conversation because it doesn't even matter. I spoke a lot in my recent video about motherhood, the reasons why Beatrice was so cruel, but I didn't really get into the extent of her psychological abuse of Bojack and how it truly formed his way of thinking. She pretty much uses him for social clout to impress all the other housewives, but when no one else is around, he essentially doesn't exist. He's told to find something to do, to go away because she's tired, and is overall ignored until he can be of use to her, always taking the opportunity because, of course, as any human does, he wants to feel as close to his parents as possible. She's so wrapped up in her own misery, her own issues, that she does not care for her child. From her perspective, there's no room for her to care for her child. And every time they speak, Beatrice reminds him of what he did to her body or her life, demeaning him and lowering his self-esteem even further, all while expecting appreciation for giving him life in the first place. Simply doing this, becoming a mother at all, makes her a hero, and that she deserves to mistreat him. And I didn't mention much about Butterscotch at all, though he does a ton of damage to Bojack's psyche himself. He doesn't involve himself in any part of Bojack's development, really, as we can see throughout Time's Arrow. When Bojack is relatively a newborn baby and is crying for attention or food, Butterscotch resolves to simply pawn it off on Beatrice, who deals with the crying through the abuse of drugs instead of comforting or feeding Bojack himself. Because Butterscotch, at the end of the day, is trying to provide that life that Beatrice is used to, and as Diane describes when she analyzes their behavior in One Trick Pony, her book about Bojack, often fails to sustain that life. So he's working extremely hard, he's extremely tired, and takes it out on his child, ultimately neglecting him. And Bojack is then left alone, crying for hours on end, believing that the world is simply harsh, cruel, and that there is no one to protect him or shield him from harm. And he will just have to make his way through life himself. We'll be speaking more about this a lot later. But Butterscotch spends most of his days locked in his study, writing his novel that isn't published until after Bojack is already an adult, and really close to his own death, even. It goes on like this, though, for decades, where he really only gets to speak to his father when he's forced to be in Bojack's vicinity, like when Beatrice forgot to pick him up from soccer practice. Oftentimes not really contributing anything to the conversation at all, because his father rants incessantly and criticizes every response that Bojack does try to give, sometimes even involving physical violence as a punishment for the so-called wrong answer. So he largely either never sees his parents, as they spend tons of time distracting themselves from their own misery, as I discussed in detail in the generational trauma video I made a while back, and when he does see them in person, they don't really look at him as a human being, or horseman being, I guess. More of a figure to simply bounce their insecurities and complaints off of, or to project their own failures onto. So this need to be seen, as Bojack describes it, is completely understandable. But I'll describe further the actual effects of this neglect in just a bit. Before I get into that, though, another great example of this comes through Diane's family, who, though definitely not as overtly physically abusive or emotionally cruel to her, also largely disregarded her as a person in favor of her 4 brothers for most of her life. We don't really get a clear picture of her mother and how they interacted when she was younger, but when she returns as an adult, all she really receives from her is blame for leaving them behind, for thinking that she's better than them and not sticking around and taking their abuse forever. It paints a really awful picture about how Diane was treated as a young woman, where striving to branch out and achieve anything was seen as stuffy or pretentious in their own family, as her brothers were then lauded for every minor success and comforted for years over every tiny failure, like them not getting into Boston College.
I'm just saying Marty could lend a hand instead of sitting on the couch watching the game all day.
Oh, Dee Dee.
You know very well. His leg's still sore from the accident at the quarry.
Yeah, he's got to rest up if he's going to be a wide receiver for BC.
He didn't get into BC.
A small injury that prevents them from actually playing a sport, or them rewatching a doomed game over and over, screaming at the television every time they lose, and begging everyone not to jinx it, which they obviously lose every single time since it took place in the 1980s.
Don't fight while the game's on. It's bad juju.
It's the 86 World Series. They lose.
why'd you have to...
We're just a bunch of savages, right?
Her father did the same, obviously, but can also be seen dismissing Diane when she has questions about her ancestry, not really paying attention to her, even though he has the information, as she states that he's a professor of Vietnamese history.
I know that, but I mean, what is our background? Why do I look different from the other kids?
Shove it up your rear, you jagoff. You're just the same as anybody else, and don't let nobody tell you different.
I just thought maybe you could give me a little more cultural context, what with you being a tenured professor of Vietnamese history at Tufts and all.
Christ, Dee, that's my job. I wouldn't ask you to have a period on your day off.
He just doesn't give her the time of day at all, treats her as less than her brothers. Not to mention, one of the worst stories Diane mentions is in Good Damage, where he sabotaged her in Boggle so he could prove that her brothers were, quote, wicked smarter than a girl. I love how Diane's brain tells her that this isn't a good enough story, but that straight up floored me, personally. The self-doubt is so strong because of all of this treatment just directly putting her down or ignoring her feelings, as I will describe again later on. But this episode gives you a lot of context for that. And if you thought this was enough, they also largely allowed her brothers to just overtly mistreat her and abuse her, not stepping in as they should and steering their sons away from that behavior before they ultimately permanently traumatized her through the Cryan situation. Honestly, hate rewatching those scenes. It's a tragedy. I think about how fucked up it is quite a bit, and it plays a huge hand in Diane's character across all seasons. Not being protected in that way does unspeakable things to people developmentally, to people that they inherently trusted because, you know, it's your immediate family. And even Todd's mother as well could be guilty of this at times, even though I applaud her greatly for working hard to rehabilitate her relationship with him and eventually return into his life, which is actually a good time to add, by the way, that it doesn't make any of these parents automatically bad people. You know, I hate defining anyone as one thing on this channel. Everybody's got layers, but it's worth noting the correlation in this behavior and, as I will discuss in a bit, the resultant behavior in their children. But when Todd was 18, he was kicked out of the house for his video game addiction, as he didn't have a job, he didn't go to school, and he didn't really care to do much of anything. It is worth noting how this is definitely addictive behavior, where he can't even take care of himself because of this game, but you know, because it's not like overtly drugs or alcohol, oftentimes it's dismissed as just like laziness for some reason, and thus he's kicked out of the house. However, I don't know. For someone to do this to their child at 18, I know this is a controversial opinion, but he did just finish high school, and he's clearly struggling with some sort of attention issues with this video game, maybe reckoning with his direction in life. So why don't we try to help him by getting a therapist or something? Breaking or selling the game so he couldn't play it, at least? She said she tried everything, but she really didn't. I know Todd was in a really bad place, but he's still a person. He's still your son. It's so fucked up to me that a lot of parents consider doing this, still forcing their children out as soon as they hit 18 or just a bit after, to prove some sort of harsh lesson about independence. And a lot of those people can end up homeless. I mean, you are their guardian. You brought them to life. It is your job to take care of them and provide them support to help them through their more difficult times. Kicking them out of the house at an arbitrary age because of, you know, what the law says, and as Todd's mom does, cutting off all contact is nothing short of emotional abuse. And I'm not really gonna treat it as anything else. It's quite a different type of the more overtly cruel instances of mistreatment that we have seen in this series, and we know that Todd's mother still cares in general a great deal for him, and genuinely thought this was the only way to deal with his issues, unlike Bojack's own parents. But it still is neglecting the actual problem, any way you slice it. Also, fun fact, I don't really give a shit that it worked out in the end and Todd ended up landing on his feet. Todd got so lucky ending up on Bojack's rich-ass couch in his rich-ass house with a subsequent thorough support system through Mr. Peanut Butter and Princess Carolyn and Diane. He gets good friends through his connection to Bojack. I mean, Princess Carolyn isn't the best at first, definitely just in it for the money, but eventually those two become like the closest friends. He could have just as easily ended up completely homeless, which happens to many children who are kicked out of the house today for whatever reason, their sexual identity, for the sake of independence, for disappointing their parents, or what have you. Stop doing this to your own children. God, I really don't like how normalized it is, too. And I think the show recognizes and touches on this as well, where it's really difficult for Todd's mother to face how long she's waited to contact him and how much it has hurt Todd that she didn't support him. It's also a little bit about the kidney, of course, where Jorge tells Todd that a mother feels that she shouldn't owe her life to her son, but I think a lot of it is also her treatment of him and Todd still doing this for her. She's the one who really has to make it up to Todd, and she does, which I found a really touching ending to Todd's story that I didn't really expect, to be honest. I'm glad we were able to clear it up and humanize and characterize his mother and show not only why she did it in the first place, but how she regrets it now. And even though Todd did develop positively and recognizes that himself, he still wished his mother just stayed in his life, tried to help him and support him, Jorge too, during that time, because he was really struggling. And it's important not to minimize all the concrete effects of neglectful parenting and the behavioral and cognitive abilities of those children later in life. I mean, as babies mature into children, there's a significant amount of growth and development taking place inside their brains, important connections being formed, and this development is inherently extremely sensitive to external stimuli. I have a quote here: "Normal development can be interrupted by deprivation related to neglect and result result in dysregulation of the neural system and lead to neurocognitive deficits, as stated in Child Neglect, Causes and Consequences, an article that I've linked below in the description. So those parts of the brain that are responsible for regulating emotions, controlling your behavior, and processing interactions with others, understanding what they are going through, are all permanently affected, and sometimes stunted from developing to sufficient levels before adulthood. Which means that sometimes this can lead to the development of mental health issues such as depression or anxiety, as well as behavioral issues such as overaggressiveness or a dependence on substances, all of which Bojack exhibits in kind over the course of the series. Bojack's fundamental lack of self-worth and inability to justify and reckon with the effects of his own existence, or the purpose of it, results in a lot of this toxic behavior that condemns him later in the series. Not that it excuses it, as I say in every video, but once again, it's always important to analyze a person from multiple angles, as no one is simply just an asshole for the sake of being an asshole. I fully believe there's always an explanation for this type of behavior. Yes, for everyone, including that person on the internet who said the most horrific insult you've ever read, especially them, in fact. I mean, you would have to not be well to write some of the things these people write online. Having a chronic lack of self-esteem can gradually degrade your mental state over the years. As we see in Stupid Piece of Shit, it can be oppressive and even exhausting at times, which is why Bojack chooses to try and drown it all out with alcohol and drugs. Although we also see in that very episode that it really does nothing to assuage those thoughts at all, it just makes them more unfocused. It's extremely common for those who were neglected to develop chronic anxiety or depression and a reliance on substances, and a lot of it stems from this feeling as if they are not worthy of love or care, or fear that they will be abandoned by everyone in their current support system. From the extreme neglect that Bojack faced from two people who were supposed to love him more than anyone else, he developed the notion, at least in the back of his mind, that it was his fault, along with theirs. And thus, every subsequent relationship, friendship, is doomed to end with them leaving him, or him doing something terrible and pushing them away. So what's the point in even trying to treat people with respect? And it results in those around him feeling as if he just doesn't care about them. Like Hollyhock does this very episode. Or, you know, they're just being pushed away, distanced. As Bojack feels that he will inevitably hurt them or poison them by being anywhere near them. And yes, we get to read into Bojack's thoughts, so we know that this is his way of caring for people. Very toxic and not healthy at all for himself, but he believes he is protecting Hollyhock from himself, who will inevitably let her down. He sets himself always up for failure because of the perception that was created from that neglect. And we see this pattern repeated over and over with those around him, losing faith in him over the seasons as he repeatedly hurts them, like Todd, who was really hurt too many times to be able to remain as close to Bojack as he was when we began. But it isn't just your self-worth that's affected either. Sources say that even your capacity for empathy can be affected through this negative treatment, which would explain why he largely doesn't consider the ramifications of this toxic behavior before he engages in it, like when he sleeps with Emily. He knows in that moment that it will upset Todd, and that's why he hides it from him, but he fails to recognize how much it will hurt him if he ever finds out, because eventually he kind of just tells him like it's not really that big of a deal. And he doesn't realize how hurt he already is from everything Bojack has done before. I talked about this behavior relating to Bojack's empathy in the video about narcissism, where I believe that Bojack is capable of feeling the emotions of those around him almost contagiously and reading people's faces, but struggling to truly understand others and put himself in their shoes, see their perspective. And that's why he repeatedly hurts them. Diane, when he fires her for releasing a part of the memoir and then berating her or pushing her away after his Oscar nomination, or Sarah Lynn's death. Princess Carolyn, when he leaves her agency for Anna, resulting in eventually closing down, and Mr. Peanut Butter. Every single time he dismisses his genuine enthusiasm and care for Bojack simply because Bojack finds it annoying. Additionally, those who have undergone neglectful childhoods may also find it difficult to access their emotions or to put them into words, which would sort of connect to their inability to put themselves in other people's position, to regulate their emotions and truly understand why they are occurring. Social skills are generally extremely difficult, and the ability to maintain relationships is fundamentally affected by early childhood neglect. And I think that many of Bojack's friendships, with their harsh ups and downs, are very, very exemplative of that. After all, there was no one to teach him the proper way to behave around people, and we see throughout his life, and especially in A Horse Walks Into a Rehab, that he fundamentally doesn't know how to treat other people, like Katie from Spanish 1, who he ends up insulting in favor of popularity and attention because that immediately makes him feel better, though he knows that he is doing the wrong thing. Because again, he was never guided in the right direction. I'd also like to bring up, under this sort of umbrella, attachment theory, which is also a very popular psychological tenet wherein children's success later in life is determined by their care as an infant and young child, at least at its most basic level. It also extends into adulthood, but there needs to be at least one caring and supportive figure in the person's life to steer them in the right direction, to teach them how to live, how to process emotions, how to just have a positive relationship with other people. Bojack never really had that person, and thus struggles greatly with his own emotional regulation. It's a large reason why he spins out of control so frequently or so violently, and why he chooses the most easy destructive path that makes him feel better in the moment rather than what he knows is actually right. Like with Herb, he gives up his friendship pretty much because of removing him from horsing around and then subsequently not calling him from the guilt of that years after. But honestly, I think Bojack would have been happier, and states himself that he would have been happier if he had just stayed friends with Herb, regardless of his career success. In the beginning, that was his favorite part, and horsing around doesn't provide him with the long-term joy that a loving and supportive friend could. And this is a common theme in Bojack's life. He doesn't really understand another way to process these emotions other than drugs, alcohol, fame, these really vapid interests that give him a short jolt back to life, to allow himself to feel them, you know, rather than engage in any of these distractions. There is a primal, inherent need to be understood by those who bore us, to be loved and cared for by those who were essentially assigned to take care of us. And regardless of blood ties, attachment theory posits that it's really simply human nature to intrinsically require a supportive other to be able to emotionally guide and protect the infant and child through early life. It doesn't have to be a parent. Infants have been shown to be uniquely calm and ordered when their primary caregiver or source of attachment was present. A loud sound, a scary picture, anything could set them off, leading to them feeling unsafe and needing that person that provides that sense of ease and safety to be there for them. Without that, the world is a terrifying, dangerous place, and they might develop tendencies to protect themselves preemptively, such as push other people away for fear of being hurt, something we know Bojack is uniquely capable of doing, or soothing themselves with fast, perhaps unhealthy methods. And quite honestly, it doesn't just go away because years have gone by, or lives have been laid to rest, or, you know, you're not a child anymore. As we see with Bojack in Free Churro, even the founders of this theory say that it spans across one's entire life, which is honestly kind of comforting to me because it means that you could always find that supportive other, even if you didn't have one early on, and that perhaps affected you later. Bojack does find a group that eventually helps him become a better, more understanding and empathetic person. And it's because he found those people that he is able to develop in that way. It doesn't have to be a person either. Ideologies, institutions, there's so many things that could provide a community for someone, give them a sense of connection, of safety, of purpose for living, and just having that sense of protection, of a safety net, allows people to be able to move in the right direction. It doesn't mean they necessarily always will, but it does give them a clear opportunity for doing so, to move past that feeling of worthlessness and those self-destructive tendencies. And throughout much of his life, Bojack never really received anything in the way of a support system, or when he did, was already so entrenched in those negative tendencies that he struggled to keep that support system around. But we don't see if Bojack as a child had any real friends that weren't at a party. Clearly no one that he actually made a connection with. Or, you know, any other family to rely on. We only ever see child Bojack alone or with his parents. So basically, you know, just alone. That's what he means in Free Churro when he says, "I was your son. All I had was you. They were the ones who were supposed to be there initially for him, to put him on the right path at the beginning, so that he didn't spiral down to the state that he's in now. All throughout his upbringing, he felt confused, unloved, forgotten, and as if the world would beat him down constantly with no reprieve, as he never had anyone to shield him from that harsh reality at any point, or teach him appropriately how to become accustomed with it without overwhelming him and causing existential dread or depression. So instead, he withdrew from others, becoming harsh and cold, closed off, relying on career success to make himself happy, which it never does. He uses underhanded methods to keep people in his life, to attempt to feel what they feel, but simultaneously thinks that he doesn't deserve them and pushes them away. And all of this is behavior that can be seen in children that grew up in neglectful households. It might not all be attributed to just that, but it definitely played an integral role in forming the person Bojack becomes by the first season of this show. All of my sources for every bit of information I just talked about is in the description below, as always. And once again, it isn't just Bojack who shows this type of behavior or these unhealthy coping mechanisms. Diane is extremely similar to Bojack, especially with regard to how she sees herself. Due to her parents' general disregard for her well-being, she often feels as if she's not a good person, or not someone who deserves proper treatment.
Chrissy Keating's a real bitch to me.
Was I? Or did you deserve it?
I deserved it.
The problem is you always blame other people, Dee Dee.
I know.
I think you're afraid of the truth.
Oh.
Your damage isn't interesting and you're unworthy of love.
Oh, I'm not.
Of course you are! Are you? One of those stupid pop culture analogies I'm always doing? Because you're charming at first, but eventually, enough already.
You think you're a beautiful salad bowl? Conceited much? More like garden variety, am I right?
You blame everyone else for all your problems, but you're the one constant here. Go Pats.
Or, in her words, a rudderless, burning, large garbage barge. Which is why she often torpedoes positive things that are going for herself, poking and prodding them, nitpicking to find cracks, even when there really aren't any, like with Guy. She fears how close they're getting, and doesn't think that she deserves that closeness, for someone to know her that well, or even fears that once they do, they will leave her and she will get hurt. And even after she overcomes that initial hump and makes the decision to move to Chicago with Guy, she still thinks the relationship will eventually crash and burn due to herself, even though Guy is one of the most patient people on Earth and would support her through her rough times.
My boyfriend saying I should take antidepressants.
Are you going to?
What's the point?
Of antidepressants? I believe the point is to be anti-depressed.
Sure, or you just flip over the nothing, and underneath there's more nothing. We're probably gonna break up soon anyway. There's only so long before he gets tired of the real me.
The real you being...
Ta-da!
I mean, this even happens after she goes on antidepressants, where she voluntarily takes herself off of them in an effort to make use of this damage, to understand as if this neglect meant something that made her a person who is worth something, since her parents and her brothers never let her feel that way. Bojack is really the one to truly understand this struggle and talk her out of it in face of depression, ensuring her that she does indeed deserve to feel good, even if she does relapse later, but that she does deserve to be with someone who makes her happy, and that results in her resolving to get help for her depression, and even after she relapses, have a support system that gets her back on help, and stay with Guy, who she ends up marrying and presumably living a wonderful, full life with. And Diane is also quick to jump onto those, perhaps, methods to make herself feel happy and in control, even though she doesn't truly yearn for them, like with marrying Mr. Peanut Butter, or sleeping with Mr. Peanut Butter when he is now in another relationship. You know, she gets a momentary feeling as if she is worth something, as if someone truly loves her, but afterwards she goes back to feeling like that large garbage barge. Or when Diane comes back from Cordovia, she really struggles to reckon with with her own emotions, that growing doubt of herself as a professional journalist who will change the world, and ultimately spirals down into a deep depression. Also due to her simply remembering and reliving the events that she saw in Cordovia, but still, this feeling of being worthless has returned, and she doesn't particularly know how to deal with it, especially since the career success that was supposed to help her deal with this neglect ended up leaving her feeling only more empty. And Todd is a good example of all of this too. Before he declares his independence from Bojack, he really struggles with his own self-image, with Bojack constantly tearing him down for being a good-for-nothing, stealing his food, and sleeping on his couch. I think the best example of this is really early on, actually, in Zoe's and Zelda's. Todd's rock opera and opinion of himself is like entirely dependent on Bojack and what he tells him. This authority figure that has sort of replaced Todd's parents, who, at least from his view, gave up on Todd completely.
I flunked out of school, my girlfriend left me, I didn't stop playing until my mom threw me out of the house. That's when I first realized, I'm a total screw-up.
You're not a screw-up anymore, Todd. You're about to have a hit rock opera on your hands.
I'm really glad you think that.
And as a result, he often feels as if he will never be able to achieve anything because of how he was treated after he went through that addiction with Decathlon 7. As his parents simply gave up on him because he's worthless and destined to simply ride on a couch and waste away his days. So when Bojack wants him to think that, he's able to put that notion into his head extremely easily and manipulate him. It really takes Bojack hurting him over and over, and Todd overtly learning the truth behind it, reeling him back in every time for Todd to realize his own worth and stand up for himself in season 3, which was an utter joy to see. Even if it's part of a longer process, as we see in Hooray, a Todd episode, where he still struggles to make time for himself, he finds a lot of value in helping others and being useful to them, after so long being told that he wasn't capable of anything. But he still doesn't recognize that his wants and needs are equally valid, fully yet. In this episode, he finally puts off some of his responsibilities that he engages in to please others in favor of something that will simply please or help himself, provide a support system for him, and in general, lift up his view of himself in a major way. This will be emotionally unbelievable for Todd, and is so important for his development, and him choosing to do that for himself over this arbitrary promise he made to this orchestra full of people we've never even met before is a great sign of him developing away from this negative view that being kicked out of the house gave him. He is capable, he knows that now, and thus he should care more for himself. Ultimately, the need to be seen is something that all humans experience unequally. It is not something we can simply declare that we don't need, cast away at a moment's notice, or even forget as time goes on. And as always, it's important to remember that while this phenomenon has been observed, it's never 100% consistent. Having neglectful parents doesn't doom you as a person to repeat these behaviors forever or sink as low as these characters do. Nor does it guarantee that you will ever even exhibit these behaviors in the first place. Many people have turned out just fine after terribly absent parents in their formative years. Like I said, with any sort of support system, with anyone guiding you, giving you purpose, protecting you, making you feel as if you aren't alone in this world, is a benefit and will help you move forward. It doesn't just need to be your parents. But it is crucial for us to understand and point out how neglect can truly interfere with people's development and can lead to more hurt or negative acts being perpetuated later in that child's life as those negative behaviors start to become second nature to protect themselves, and they rely on it more and more as time goes on. When we meet Bojack, he has been doing this for decades, and that is why it is so hard for him to reverse or change this type of behavior. It is instinct at this point. He's been doing it since he was a child to cover for that hole that his neglectful parents left inside of him. But let me know if you agreed or disagreed with anything in this video, and if you want to see more from this channel, consider supporting me on patreon.com/PosiTVty, that's PosiTVty. There you get all of these videos before they come out on YouTube. You get the unedited essay so you can hear all of my mistakes, things that I maybe redacted, rephrased, all of that wonderful stuff, and you can tell me exactly what you want to see, and I'll do it. I am currently watching through Ruby for one of our patrons to make a video on that, so hey, you could really request anything. I mean, a lot of things I haven't seen, but you never know. Anyway, I will see you for the next video though. Thank you for the support on YouTube because it means a lot. Subscribe, like, all that wonderful stuff, and know that someone out there appreciates you for being here. It's me. I appreciate you for being here. Thank you for being here. Really, it means a lot, and I'm glad you're here.